I've explained in a previous video how you can sit one person on one cube, and let me see if I can find that file. There we go, dual seat, exactly. That is, I think that is a scene I've prepared for this. So on a with one person, I've explained that you have an object like a couch, or in my case a cube, and you add a subdivision smoothing modifier to the underlying seat object, and then you go and sit the person down, and they then dig into the seat. That is what I've explained in the video, and that's a great concept if you have one person and you have one subdivision surface modifier. But if you had two people, I mean, I've made it happen here, and I'll show you how it works. But if you have two people, that's not quite as easy. So in an ideal world, if I was going to make him sit in here, what I do is, with my cube object or my seat object selected, let's go ahead and head over to Edit Object, Geometry, add smoothing modifier. That's the first thing we need to do, and that is something that'll create a property on our object that's then accessible in parameters under mesh smoothing. Here it is, and that has some settings and a collision item. So if I go and set that to my person, in this case the Genesis 8 male, then watch what happens with the seat object. It deforms, and that's very, very cool. And if I go and crank this up to 20, it'll look even cooler. And now I can go ahead and take my man here and go move him around. If I want to move him to the edge of the seat, this is gonna happen magically, and it's all great. And people are loving it, which is good. I like that this can make our scenes more realistic. But the problem, of course, arises with what might happen if I had a second person, because if I make my Genesis 2 female visible, I can still see the indentation of the man here, but the female doesn't have one, and it doesn't look good. And the problem is that on my cube object, on my mesh smoothing object, I can only select either the male or the female person. So if I select her now, then the indentation will be under her derrière, but not underneath his anymore. And that's not good, is it? Because we want for that to happen with both characters. And there's currently no way in DAZ Studio to tell it, hey, just use both or use a group. So that's another possibility. I have a people group in which both characters are, so I can go and make both of them invisible. So that's kind of convenient. So I could, logic dictates, try and make the collision item the actual people group. And when I do that, however, nothing happens, because the group itself doesn't have the necessary geometry. It's just a holder object that doesn't have any geometry itself that could collide with something else. So what can we do? We can either split the seat object into two pieces and then hide half on one, hide half on the other, and then apply two smoothing modifiers. That is one option, but it is it's a bit of a stretch. So it's difficult to do that. A much easier way to do it is to export my people. So I'll go and hide my cube and essentially everything else that's in the scene, and grab my people, export them as an OBJ, and then import the OBJ again and use that as a proxy object to create both indentations. So you can leave the people as they are with clothing and everything. Just make sure everything else is hidden in the scene, and then head over to File, Export, and export both these two people objects. So I've got one object already. I might oversave it in a moment. I might just oversave it now. Just say yes, that's fine. Every time you move the people, you have to export this again as well. Just pick the DAZ Studio preset, that'll be fine. Hit accept. And that is that. Now, depending on the amount of clothing items and the subd modifier, depending on how that's set, that might be quite heavy in regards to geometry. So I recommend, since we only really need a proxy object there, turn everything that you're about to export into low resolution before you do that. So I'll show you the comparison in file size there. The way you do that is by selecting each person and heading over to mesh resolution, and then set this, that's on the parameters tab, set this from high resolution to base resolution on every object in your scene, because that literally just gets rid of so many polygons that you really don't need to create that indentation. Even better, you can, indeed it is, isn't it, Biscuits? Absolutely. Even better, there is a product by 3D Universe that I use all the time that is called Scene Tools, and it comes as 3 parts. And the first one, Scene Tools Set 1, has a little thing that adds itself up to the toolbar here. That's this button, and what that does is literally go through every item in your scene and sets everything to low resolution, and vice versa back to high resolution. So if I were to click this button now, regardless of what's selected in my scene, all of my objects, which is just 2 people, are being turned into base resolution. But it also does that with other things. So like my cube is also no longer smooth. It is now a kind of a sharp-edged cube. So that is now all base resolution. And now if you export them, I'll just hide the cube again, say export, and I'll say 2 people low res. Keep everything as it is, and let's go and compare the 2 file sizes here, because it is dramatic, the amount of the file size. Dual seat. Here it is in OBJs. So we have the 2 people, this one here is 5 megabytes. That's the low res version, and the high res version is already 21 megabytes. So that's a significant difference. It's basically 4 times the size, and I'm using regular Genesis people for that. I'm not using the 8.1 people for that. You're probably wondering why how do I know the file sizes? They show up down here. 21 megabytes on 2 people, and then 2 people low res, that's 5 megabytes. So it's a fourth of the file size. So if you have a Genesis 8.1 figure, that subdivision surface modifier is set to 2, so you're probably going to have this to the power of 8. And if you had clothing items, that's just going to increase the whole amount of geometry there to a certain amount. So what we're going to do now is import my low-res proxy object again. So that's under File, Import, and I'll bring in 2 people low-res, and that's going to look a little crazy. I'll just pick the DAZ Studio preset as well. Hit accept, and this may look a little crazy, creepy. So if I go and make my 2 people invisible, it looks like 2 people are still there. And of course we don't really want to do that. So I'll just move them out of the way here a little bit. Oop. Just to prove a point, there are now more people in here than there should be. It looks creepy. And I'm glad you spotted the crab already. Yes, that is something I've been building that on my Twitch channel during the week. I thought this project was going to take a lot longer than it did. So now the crab's going. It's very nice. Yes, and I've put him in so that every 5 minutes he goes and walks through my overlay. I hope you like him. Oh, does he? Oh, thank you for letting me know, Julia. Maybe I've got a wrong file there. Let's see if it's. Let's see if I can correct it. So I've got my 2 people here. I'm going to go and disable, or just make the 2 people low res. I might call that just a proxy object, just so that I remember what that is. I can make them invisible, and then turn everything back into high res. That's with the little Scene Tools icon. So if you look closely at my friend, the male figure here, he looks a bit chunky on the ears now. And if I go and click that little icon now, takes a second, depends on how many objects are in your scene. Everything goes back to high res, which is nice, except for my proxy object, the low res people, because they don't have a subdivision surface modifier. So I'll go make the cube visible again, and with my cube selected, I'll go back to my parameters tab to mesh smoothing, and then instead of the people group, which didn't work, I'm going to go and let him collide with the 2 people low res proxy object. And as soon as I do that, that OBJ creates the indentation, and now both people can sit on the chair rather comfortably and create the indentation. Haha! Another mystery solved. So the only issue with that approach is that when you go and say, maybe I'd like to move my female figure, my second figure here, over to the right a little bit, she moves but the indentation doesn't. So as you make that change, you have to go and once you have the final position of both figures sorted out, you're going to have to go and export them again and bring in that low-res proxy object again, just so that you know, you can you get the proper indentations. So that is that. 2 people or multiple people. You can do it with as many people as you like. So you can have like 3, 6, 10, 20 people if your graphic card can render that. So there we go. That's the 2 people on one object.